Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being on time. Tried to leave a little window there for people to join in. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for stepping into this much needed conversation. Today is a beautiful day where I'm living, and I hope it's a beautiful day where you're living, because the rain just means that the greenage is going to be even stronger and the summer is going to be even more prepared because of that rain. So I'm thankful for the rain, and therefore it is a beautiful day. This conversation that we're going to be having today with the Honorable Dr. Anthony Andrews Jr. is one of a lot of importance to us in our Southeast Queens communities. And I'm excited to hear some of the things that we're going to be speaking about this afternoon. So I wanted to thank you all for joining once again, and then also give space for all those that are on phone. If you are calling in, you won't be able to participate. It's a listen only for this occasion. Hopefully we'll be able to dive into many of the subjects that matter to our community with relation to quality of life. So this is the second town hall that we're hosting. The last one was a little bit of a touch on different subjects, but today we're going to lock in on some very key and important subjects with relation to quality of life. With that being said, good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Andrews.
Good evening, Jermaine. How are you?
Man, I am good. I'm trying, this rain is really rejuvenating. I really feel it. And I hope that everyone else has that same kind of energy towards it as well.
Well, I just hope that most people don't do what I do on rainy days when it's not campaigning, at least. Stay in bed.
Right, yeah.
Hopefully people, if they are in bed, hopefully they tune us in on their desktop or laptop or their iPad to join us, or tablet tonight. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for being such a great host. The last time, I'm looking forward to us getting right into the quality of life issues and making space for people to voice their concerns and to ask me questions about things that we may be talking about doing, things that we intend to do once elected.
Awesome. To that note, if anyone throughout the conversation, there are going to be some subjects that we're talking about, feel free to really functionally use the chat section, the chat function on our Zoom here, so that you can put in your question. If you have any remarks, any affirmations, that's the space to do it. Please feel free to do so. We want to make sure that we're getting everyone's voices the way we can right now in this medium. So now let's jump into things, because it is 6:19, and I know there's a lot of different subjects that we're going to have to discuss this afternoon. Thanks. Thank you. A lot of different discussions that we're going to have this afternoon. But before we get to all of that, and just giving space for those that wasn't able to make it to our last town hall, Dr. Andrews, can you just give us an understanding of your backstory? Because we know that the backstory really explains the vision and what are the foundations of someone. So let us know a little bit about your backstory, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Jermaine. I think, we've been out in the community for the last several months, close to a year now, raising awareness about people's concerns in the community by talking to other neighbors and telling them that they're not alone, that many people have the same concerns as they have. And we want to try to address these issues in a systematic way. And I can speak to these issues very prominently because I'm born and raised in Jamaica. Grew up in South Jamaica, born at Jamaica Hospital, single mother, and worked very hard. Middle class family, and my grandparents helped to raise me because my mother was so young. And as an early teen, I found my way into an election, helping Democratic candidates get elected because they were paying kids in the neighborhood to hand out literature, to put literature in people's doors. And so about the age of 15 years old, I guess 16 years old, I became involved with the local election party election. And then I found my way over to the Fred Wilson Democratic Club, which was the 32nd AD Democratic Club at the time. And there I began to work with people, and I began to be groomed by my mentors, Tom White and Juanita Watkins. I started out with the Young Democrats. We first formed an organization in the Democratic Club, which became the model for most Democratic clubs in Queens. It was a youth council, which most Democratic clubs didn't have. But the county chair decided that we were doing such great work that we should, have youth councils at every single Democratic club. From there, we began to form a Young Democrats organization in Queens County, and I became the secretary of the Young Democrats at 16 years old. I was the youngest officer for the Young Democrats, and I got a chance to meet people from all across the borough of Queens, a lot of leaders, people who are in public office now, or people who are appointed as officials throughout the city of New York have talked about how I got them involved with the Young Democrats in the 90s. But the truth is, I started with the Young Democrats in the mid 80s. We then began to really become the youth arm of the Democratic Party of Queens County. A few years later, Tom White thought it would be a good idea for me to run for public office. And he said, you can make history. You can become the youngest Black person ever elected to a Democratic Party post in New York State. And I think that's a great thing for young people in our community to be able to see. A young Black man getting involved with politics and getting elected. So Tom White and Juanita Watkins encouraged me to run for Democratic State Committee while Tom ran for Democratic District Leader. Had a contested election. I started my election at the age of 19, and when I was elected, I was 21 years of age. And at that point, I became the youngest elected Democrat, not just Black Democrat, but the youngest elected Democrat at that time in the history of New York State. Governor Mario Cuomo had a youth task force that he had put together, and I joined the youth task force. And soon afterwards, Governor Cuomo appointed me to be the chair of the Governor's Youth Task Force. This is probably the late 1980s. After I became a Democratic State Committee person, I became the chair of the Governor's Youth Task Force. Soon afterwards, they encouraged me to run for the Young Democrats presidency of New York State, and I became the Young Democrats president. Years later, I ran for city council, 2001, with the support of Tom White and Juanita Watkins, my mentors. Very little support from any other public official in the area until the very end. And I lost a very tough city council race in 2001. I walked away from politics. A lot of people don't realize this, and maybe some of the people on this call may not realize I've been involved with politics for so long and may have wondered what happened. Well, I walked away from politics, Jermaine, for about 9 or 10 years. And I came back when Tom White had just transitioned, and I became the Democratic District Leader, taking his old position. And from that point in time, I've tried to build a better democratic organization in our community, which has resulted in the Fred Wilson Democratic Club becoming active again after many years of little or no activity. And you, of course, becoming the executive director of our Democratic Club. Backstory, nonprofit organization involved with several nonprofits, represented commissioners for nonprofits, the president of your college on nonprofit organizations, and then began to serve in my own space as the treasurer of the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, and became a board member of the Community Advisory Board for the Queens Hospital Center. Eventually serving 18 years on the Queens Hospital Center Community Advisory Board, I served several years as the chairperson. And finally, that culminated last summer with a Lifetime Achievement Award, which was called the Marjorie Matthews Lifetime Achievement Award from the Health and Hospital Corporation for my service to health and hospitals as an advocate and a champion for healthcare in our community.
Dr. Andrews, I'm always, I get to this place where I'm hearing this story, and you realize that there's so much that you have done in this life of yours, in terms of giving back to the community, in terms of leadership in the community. And it's always, really good to hear the story and how it got you where you are. And, you were speaking just now, a lot of different things started to resonate, the mentors that you had from Juanita Watkins, and then even like the work that you're doing now, or you've done, with being district leader and coming back to politics. Can you explain to me what your idea in that time, what you've learned around the idea of leadership. And then also, some other examples of what leadership looks like for you in 2022.
So I just about to get into that, Jermaine, actually. So as the director of Associate Director of Student Leadership and Campus Programs at York College, and I've been at York College for 29 years, I teach leadership and mentoring to students at York College. In fact, I've mentored several students over the years at York College. Some of the students are involved with my campaign. My doctorate, as you know, is in executive leadership. I consider myself a transformational leader. That is somebody who believes in transforming others into leaders. I believe that I'm an authentic leader. So I lead with authenticity. I lead with a direction and guidance of being an authentic person, authentic to myself, and authentic in my representation of facts and issues and ideology to others. And I also consider myself to be a servant leader. And I teach my students about serving others. It's important to serve others. It's, sometimes people get elected and they begin to think about how they can serve the best way that they know how. And they sometimes make decisions without thinking about the people that they're serving. Well, if you're a servant leader, you're thinking first and foremost, not about how you can get reelected, but how you serve those people who you're supposed to represent. So I consider myself a servant leader. And of course, I'm a leader in my faith with the Knights of Peter Claver as the area deputy of the Knights of Peter Claver from New York City. And leadership to me is extremely important, but I believe that anyone can be a leader. Some people think that leaders are born. Leaders are not just born, leaders can be made. In my opinion, we don't need just one leader in this position. We need a community of leaders to support the person in this position. And I believe that we can transform this entire community into a community of leaders that can galvanize the populace and share a vision that can turn this community into something greater than it is right now.
Yeah, the fundamentals there of servant leadership and collective action, really speaks to what will, I believe, help our communities, in a really good way. So that truly resonates with me. I want to take this opportunity to just remind everyone, please feel free to get in the chat. For those that are on the phone, I don't have the thing in front of me right now. I can't see if there are, but for those that are on the phone, you won't be able to do that. This is listen only. So now we did backstory. We talked about a little bit about my favorite subjects, which is leadership. Why quality of life first? So what is going on? Whereas this would be the first kind of conversation that we want to dig in deep with the community.
So quality of life issues, because Jermaine, quite frankly, these are the issues that impact you most of all. Everybody is concerned, whether they realize it or not, about the quality of life that they have, the quality of life with their families, the quality of life with their neighbors. And people are concerned about their own individual quality of life. When you wake up in the morning and you go out to work, you're looking at the things that impact you directly, whether it be sanitation and cleanliness of your neighborhood, whether it be noise pollution, and also whether it's, a concern of yours getting to the bus stop back and forth and not having to worry about something happening to you. So you're concerned about law enforcement and also being safe. When you go out on the weekends, you may want to go out and you may want to do something with your family, or you just may want to go out and do something yourself, like sit in the park. But you want a nice park to go and sit into, right? You want a nice park that you can go and sit in. And as you sit in, I should say, the park, you want to be able to enjoy the park, whether that's just listening to the birds in the air or sitting by Baisley Park, the lake, and getting the wind. Those are things that are important quality of life issues. And yeah, the truth is, Jermaine, because those issues are so important, we have to worry about those issues first and foremost, because it's the quality of life issues that drive people out of New York City. People move, a lot of seniors, they move to Florida and other places. They move to Atlanta, Georgia, because they don't believe the quality of life is as good here as in those places. They believe they can get a house, a home. They can live a lot with a lot less money, and the quality of life is better. Now, I'm not so sure that that's the case, but that is a perception. And in order to dispel the perception, you have to do a little bit more to make sure that people feel like their quality of life is improving in this community. So those are the issues where the community can expect an elected official who is really, really concerned about quality of life issues can do the most good. It is really important to the voters, especially the voters in our community, Jermaine. I mean, maybe in some communities, they don't talk about quality of life issues, but the first thing people talk about when we hit the doors is quality of life issues. So,
you know, I've been doing a lot of time, I spent a lot of time looking at data on a personal level, you know, and just spending a lot of time with New York Speaks and the data that they've been cultivating and basically mining for New York City. I think it doesn't give us full scope of what the issues are that speak to our community because we're so unique, you know, in that, you know, our demographics is a little bit different than the rest of New York City. We're so unique. But I think that across the board, Southeast Queens, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head, just having a conversation about quality of life and those things that really matter. So, so we understand why that's important, you know, with you knocking on the doors, with you understanding that these are ways that people can, as a form of mental health, sitting in that park and listening to to listen to the birds and the wind hitting us at Paisley Pond. But there are some issues that really stand out amongst the quality of life issues, right? First, illegal dumping, you know, illegal dumping and littering. So do you have any kind of, what is your process towards how we would address this very, I guess, you know, one of the important issues that impact us with quality of life? Muted?
Sorry, Jermaine, before I get into that, let me touch on something I just touched on briefly, and I just want to be clear about this because it's really important. So the concern in our community, one of the concerns is, of course, law enforcement, right? Now, you know, you fall different ways on this issue. I have always said, you know, I think the people in our community are supportive of the police as long as the police are respectful and they're protecting us and they're truly serving us, right? So I believe that we expand, protect, and serve to respect at the same time. But we also need more law enforcement officers on the street, right? And because of that, I believe we should have community policing, but I also believe that we need to work with the police. And that's one of my core philosophies, working with the police, bringing the police not only into the community, but doing things not just with the precinct councils, but forming coalitions with the police department so that we can figure out how we can address these issues best with the cure violence groups. But I don't believe it should be solely on the police to police our community. I believe that part of the responsibility is ours. And I think that's why, Jermaine, I'll just allude to this because I think it's important. We have received the endorsement of the New York State Guardians Association, which is of course, the law enforcement fraternal orders that are of color. They have endorsed us and we are very proud of their endorsement because they believe that we'll be able to work with the police to address some of these issues in our community. Now, let me jump right into illegal dumping and littering. This is a huge issue. As we go to the doors, we talk to people. This is one of the biggest issues that comes up. People think that it's only our community. It's not. It's in all communities. But it seems to be a real problem in our community. The dumping, right? Big problem. You can go throughout Southeast Queens and see dumping, but it seems that through South Jamaica and the areas throughout Jamaica, you see more illegal dumping than anywhere. It just seems that way. And I've walked the entire district now. And that's what seems to be a real issue. So what do we do about that, right? Well, we have an idea that we might be able to create a mobile camera pilot program, which will catch the illegal dumpers. We want to be able to get people. I've seen civic leaders. Aracia Cook has talked about this. She's gone out and she's taken pictures of the dumping. And she's asked people at the 149th Street Civic to see if they can catch people while they're actually doing the dumping. Well, with this pilot camera program, I think we can actually catch the illegal dumpers and then we can issue them violations, right? We'll have photo evidence. We can catch the illegal dumpers, the plates, the car, so on and so forth, give them summons, and then hold them accountable for the dumping. I think also we have to reduce the amount of derelict property in our community because a lot of, we've gone through, I mean, I don't know how many neighborhoods, and we've seen the illegal dumping, not just on the curb, but they've been illegal dumping on these properties that are derelict. And there's nobody looking after these properties. So nobody's going to clean it up, right? So now your property value goes down because there's this corner house and people have come and dumped mattresses and all kinds of things in the yard of this corner house. So if we can encourage responsible development in our community, and I've been doing that, working with and talking with people who are discussing development, affordable housing, affordable senior housing, then I think we can, reduce the amount of dumping on these derelict properties because the land will be used for development. I look at, there's one thing that comes to mind in particular. So there's a piece of property off Linden Boulevard, which is owned by a developer, well owned by a business person, let's say. They would love to have a developer come in and create something on this property. And so would the neighbors. But the worst part is that they just don't feel that they need to keep up the property outside. They don't feel like they need to keep up the fence that was there. So the fence is being pulled down in certain areas. And so what people have done is they've driven up to the property, which is owned by one of the businesses in the community. The family owns it, but the father has decided, I don't know what to do with it. And the sons have decided, we're not sure what to do with it. And people are illegal dumping in this property. Now the neighbor's upset about it, but what we can do is to try to bring those neighbors together with the business and hopefully think about doing something like senior development. We've talked about senior housing and creating affordable senior housing. This would be a perfect spot off Linden Boulevard for truly affordable senior housing. And it's something we talked to the property owner about, who is one of the businesses of our community, and something we talked to the neighbors about too. Everybody would be in agreement that this is a good idea. Just need to find a responsible developer who would be interested. Senior housing is big now. We need to find the people to come together and do this.
What I find interesting here is that essentially this is where we're seeing how one issue is kind of leaking over into another issue and impacting it. So a quality of life issue such as illegal dumping, and then finding solutions for that and what that means for housing, as an option, and getting those type of options available to our community. I will say that, with relation to illegal dumping, in our communities, it seems like every other borough, everyone is, except maybe Staten Island, but every other borough, everyone is kind of on each other, literally on each other. And so there's not as much opportunity. But seeing here that we're kind of, the policies, the ideas that you're bringing is actually probably moving us towards 2022, 2023 with, the cameras there where we can hold people accountable and get their license plates and really hone in on who's doing what and when. And then holding people accountable. So, we can really keep that level of quality of life up and better for our community. So I appreciate the forward thinking of that, the ingenuity of it, and really bringing, such a resource towards helping our communities look and feel better. Moving on to another subject that is still in line, quality of life, still in line with things that we see on a regular basis in our streets. And that is speaking about the illegal parking and the illegal body shops and the home mechanics that take up 16 to 17 spaces, including, the 10 cars that are in their garage. Talk to me a little bit or a lot of bit about your ideas around how do we solve this issue?
So, we've seen this issue, as you say, Jermaine, throughout the community, right? But the pilot program with the cameras, we can help use the pilot program with the cameras to not only enforce illegal dumping, but also to catch illegal truck traffic. So we have trucks that are parking, tractor trailers that are parking on residential streets, some that are leaving their truck overnight, some that are leaving their truck for 2 weeks. Since we had such a backlog in the supply chain through the pandemic, there's some truckers that we found that could not get their shipments to where they needed to get their shipments. And they just left the trucks there. Absurd. So we've had a problem with truck parking in residential areas, but the cameras can catch this, right? They can catch people doing that, right? What we'd like to do is create an option for these truckers. We'd like to see if maybe we could get USB Arena, right? Which is a UBS Arena, which is brand new in Elmont, to possibly allow us to use their parking lot overnight to create a lawful parking lot in the area. Southeast Queens is great. If we did that, the trucks would have some place to park overnight. They wouldn't be parking in residential areas. They could pay for the parking. The parking would basically, I think it would pay for itself, essentially. And of course, then we believe that we'd be able to give UBS Arena, some extra dollars to assist with this. They've gotten enough tax breaks, I believe. They've gotten enough support from the local officials and the state officials. So I think, again, with all the tax breaks they've gotten, they can afford to do something like this. This is like, hey, let's help out the community that surrounds us with the quality of life issues like overnight trucking. So maybe we can get them to do something like that. Body shops, the illegal body shops, big issue, you're right, whether it be the mom and pop illegal body shop or it be the illegal body shop that's illegal because the license expired or they've had fines and they continue to operate, right? We have a number of these in the community, but we've got to create a process to regulate the body shops and crack down on the curbside mom and pop body shops, which destroy the parking in our communities and destroy the parking on the strips also. Because they sometimes then, as you said, don't just park on the street, they'll park along the strips like Rockaway Boulevard. I've had the 113 precinct go out and take a look. Now they can sometimes tow the cars away if they're illegally parked. They don't have a license plate, but if they do and they're legal, they can't do anything about this. The cars can sit there for a week or two while somebody's waiting to come and work on this car while they're working on other cars. And you're right, it just damages the quality of life. The other thing I'd like to do is to encourage residential truck delivery zones, right? Every day we see these huge Amazon, FedEx trucks, UPS trucks, going down these streets that are not big enough for one car, let alone a truck and a car, right? But they're two-way streets in our community especially. And maybe there can be a residential truck delivery zone so that they go down certain streets and other streets they're not going through, so that will ease the congestion on some of these streets. Because what happens is, unless you're coming to an apartment building, they're parking these trucks in the middle of the street, sometimes making not just one delivery, but 2 or 3 deliveries, and you can't even get by. Or somebody else is coming back behind them another way. They're waiting for these guys to come out. You're trying to get to work, and this is a real issue for people. So maybe we can create a delivery zone where people can actually use certain streets to go down and deliver packages, whereas other streets would be streets that would be accessible, more accessible. Just an idea, but that's something we're talking about.
Yeah, but it's very important to start having those conversations, because now that you bring that up, I haven't pinpointed it myself, but I do notice that, that pretty much you have to reverse. If you really want to get out, you have to reverse. And they're not moving because you're honking, because they have on their headphones, and they're working, they're just trying to do their job. I get it. But, you really hit a point that I think it's coming soon, where it's going to be a real issue for us. So thank you for doing that. I did want to just acknowledge Jessica Pringle's point and Lisa Clark's point. So I'll just read that. Greetings, I would add, the quality of the products and services we receive in our neighborhoods as opposed to other boroughs. Products from supermarkets in areas of Queens are just different from products in Long Island. Products in Walgreens and Green Acres is different from products in Walmart deeper into Long Island. And then Lisa Clark added, just to add a quality of life products, a quality of services in local banks. Touch on that a little bit for us, Dr. Andrews, if you can, these great points that was just brought up here. And just the quality, not only the quality of life, but the quality of service, the quality of product that we get in Southeast Queens. You're muted.
So we do give tax breaks to certain businesses in the community, economic development zones, which they should be using to, of course, improve not only their facades, the money that they save with tax breaks, but also, of course, to improve the quality of service, right? Whether that means hiring more people, making sure that the inventory is up to par, or making sure that the inside of the grocery stores, that they are welcoming and that they have the type of food that is healthy food. And of course, providing better options for us, as we talked about. And as we discussed that, I just want to mention the other day, speaking of this, we went out to Ernest Foods, which is located right off Baisley and Merrick Boulevard. And on my Facebook page, you'll see a video, my personal Facebook page, Anthony DeAndrews Jr., you'll see a video, two videos, part one and part two, of the quality of food they have in Ernest Foods. I mean, it's almost like a Whole Foods in our community. In fact, it is basically a Whole Foods, but better. It's a Black-owned business, a small business. And not only do they have foods that are organic and healthy, but they also stock different items from other small companies. But a lot of the companies are local Black-owned businesses. Now they have some national brands also, but a lot of the businesses which they stock, whether it be hair care, whether it be supplements, whether it be detox teas, a lot of the services that they have, that they offer, are services, or I should say items, really products, that are given to them to advertise as a service. They do this for Black businesses in our community. And of course, that's correct. A lot of our preconditions are determined by the foods that we eat, whether you talk about diabetes or you talk about kidney failure. Healthy food options is not something we have in our communities of color. So I've been promoting Ernest Foods as a way for people to go out and not support local businesses, not just Ernest Foods, but the local businesses that they promote, Black-owned businesses and national Black-owned businesses, but also as a way to get healthy food options. It's a great store. The prices are not only competitive, they're better than Whole Foods. And it's right here in our community, right off 123rd and Merrick Boulevard. So I agree with that.
All right.
Let me just mention this, Jane. Let me just mention this. Mm-hmm. The point about the grocery stores, the supermarkets in particular, being different than those in other areas, absolutely on target also. Not just the quality of the foods, but even if you go to the supermarkets, some of the large supermarkets like Stop and Shop, absolutely right. The stuff that is in Long Island is not the stuff that they serve us or give us in our communities, I should say. You can look at the stuff that's stocked, and I've gone out to the stores, Long Island, even just in Elmont, and I've seen the Stop and Shops in Long Island and Nassau County, and I've gone there just on my way someplace and picked up things. I can't find some of the things that they have on the shelves at our Stop and Shop here on Merrick Boulevard. They just don't have it. And why not? Because they're healthier food options for sure, but they do not stock them on our shelves. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I just, knowing what's out there in the community with Ernest Foods and sharing that resource and propping up those type of businesses that we know with the, I guess when we talk more business on the town hall, those type of businesses should be a priority, getting to community and our community. So we have those options and not, having to go to Long Island for those, for quote unquote quality products, really get some healthy options here. Let's discuss homelessness, as a quality of life issue, not necessarily in depth as policy, but homelessness, group homes, and aggressive panhandling. I feel very comfortable walking into, Dunkin' Donuts or wherever when there is an aggressive panhandler because I'm 6'2", 245 pounds, but simultaneously, my wife going out alone makes me feel nervous. I know there are a lot of people that have that same kind of feel to, the aggressive panhandling and and what we have happening in our community right now. Tell us a little bit about how you plan to address that, how you plan to bring some of these ideas, 2022 ideas, I'll call them, into helping us deal with this, what seems to be a rising quality of life issue in our communities.
Well, it's in particular an issue that has become a real issue for the business owners along Suffolk Boulevard. In particular, those areas where the development is starting to happen in a big way, from Liberty Avenue up to approximately Hillside Avenue on Suffolk Boulevard. It started really to become bad during the pandemic. And of course, then during the pandemic, for whatever reason, it seemed that a number of new homeless shelters were being placed in our community. Not necessarily with the full support of people in our community, obviously. In fact, just about all the shelters were done without our knowledge. Somebody came in and said, oh, I'm building a hotel. And then all of a sudden, they got permission from the city agency to build it or to make it a homeless shelter, hotel. And that's what they did. They made it a homeless hotel. So all of a sudden, throughout the pandemic, we have this proliferation now in Southeast Queens of homeless shelters, basically. How do you deal with that? Well, now the proliferation of panhandlers has gotten out of control on Suffolk Boulevard. The business owners are calling me saying, can we talk to the 103rd precinct? Because of course, during the pandemic, now people had to set up outside areas where people could eat. And when they set up the outside areas where people could eat, even during the wintertime, there were people who were coming in and aggressively panhandling people inside the area, which was covered outside of the restaurant. And then the owner couldn't get outside to really do anything about that. And sometimes the owners did, and they threatened the owners. Well, we've got to deal with the housing issue, right? That's really the true issue, right? Because we can't just look the other way and say, look the other way and say, listen, there's a homeless issue. So what are we doing about the homeless issue? So there's a housing affordability crisis, in particular in our community. We have a shortage of affordable homes and a shortage of affordable developments. Multi-dwelling developments that are affordable are in short supply in Southeast Queens, in particular in Jamaica. We have a lot of buildings going up, a lot of buildings, but not really truly affordable housing. So we've got to develop some affordable housing, but especially senior housing. The one thing the pandemic has shown me is that we have a lot of seniors that are homeless. It's not an issue that's talked about. It's not an issue that people are aware of. But we have a lot of seniors that are homeless in our community. And those that are not are complaining about the property taxes and complaining they can't afford the property tax anymore. And so they're not sure if they can continue to afford the house that they own. Part of the district really is concerned more about the property taxes. The other side of the district, which is a lot of apartment buildings, a lot of multi-dweller units, is really concerned about the homeless issue because they see it when they come out of their apartment buildings. And then, of course, they're also concerned about making sure that they're able to stay in these apartments. We've got to do something about the homeless issue by addressing it, by creating a transitional housing voucher program, which will allow people to go into transitional housing. Let's forget about the temporary homeless shelters. Let's put people into transitional housing. Let's get them off the streets, give them wraparound services and these transitional housing developments so that we can address all of their concerns and address all of the issues. Some people have social issues that they have to be concerned with related to their family. Some people have mental issues. We've got to have a transitional housing voucher program, which will allow them to transition into true housing and then have social workers and counselors that can assist with some of the other problems that unfortunately disable them in certain ways so that they can't go out and be productive citizens and provide for themselves, let alone their families at times. We've also got to do one more thing. As we've gone through this district, if there's one thing that has really hit home, we've gone through the NYCHA developments. The New York City housing has to do a better job with repairs, obviously. So they don't get around the repairs. And we've met people in New York City housing developments that are actually making their own repairs because they don't believe they can afford to wait or because the work is not quality work. They are hiring people in public housing to do their own repairs in their apartments. That's unacceptable. We've got to fully fund NYCHA. and provide a safety net to house the most at-risk New Yorkers, those on public housing.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes, there's always these nuggets in there, real gems. Just figuring out, New York City does have a homeless crisis, and from the work that I do, working with young people that are aging out of foster care, our concern is them becoming homeless, and so there's a level of sensitivity that I have to it. Simultaneously, I do believe like the aggressiveness of the panhandling is something that is of concern for our community in a real way. I just want to take this opportunity to do some housekeeping. Once again, thank you for joining us for this conversation with Dr. Anthony Andrews. This is our conversation around quality of life issues for those just joining. We have several conversations lined up over the next few weeks, days, just diving in deep. Some of these ideas that we've heard, even from supporting, our Black-owned businesses, that I'm sure is going to be a reoccurring theme. Supporting our businesses along corridors and Sutton Avenue, and these are going to be a reoccurring theme over our conversations as well. But today is focused on quality of life. Right now, we have a few good points and a few good comments in the chat. Please feel free to share there. Get it off your chest. This is a little bit of a sample data for us as well, just to really understand what people are talking about, how they're feeling about our community, and where the help needs to be, the new vision needs to be. And we believe that's Dr. Anthony Andrews, and that's why we're having this conversation, so you guys can get a glimpse of some of these great ideas. So just to jump back in, quality of life, I will say personally, that is my number one issue. That is my number one issue, because there's I too was born at Jamaica Hospital, and I too live in Southeast Queens, and I'm raising my child here and my family, and so it's consistently a thing where I'm here because I love here. Let's not lose the fabric of who we are. But let's talk a little bit about noise pollution. Let's talk a little bit about speeding, illegal, what are those things called? Dirt bikes and ATVs and those type of things that, kind of bring traffic to a standstill and sometimes endanger pedestrians and other car drivers, et cetera. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are your plans there? And share with everyone.
So, these are big issues in our community, like you said. Along the strips in particular, we've seen, sometimes 150, it seems like 100 ATVs going down the strip of Sutton Boulevard or Rockaway Boulevard or Linden, or even Guy Brewer Boulevard. And you're right, sometimes very dangerous, popping wheelies, doing things that are unsafe for other drivers. We've also seen situations on the news where another driver, a automobile driver, has actually hit one of these guys on one of these bikes, and serious things have happened. They've attacked the driver. I've heard too many times where these things have happened. So here's my idea. In order to deal with some of those things, I think, again, the pilot camera program can address some of these things. Now, police are, if they see people with ATVs, they are to confiscate them, or if they're on a city street operating them. They can keep them in the driveway. They can tow them on a truck, take them someplace else where they can drive them, but they can't and aren't supposed to operate them on city streets. Now, there are a few times, like I think there was a big rally for DMX, and there was a rally on the anniversary of DMX when the 103rd and 132 precinct allowed them to congregate in a particular area and to show tribute to him by riding the ATVs up and down the block for about an hour or two, and then they closed it down. But in general, this is a big issue for people in our community. But I think, again, these cameras can catch people, right, who are doing this and issue summons and fines. Eventually, you get enough fines, you get enough summons, you're going to have to address it, or else, you may, when you get caught the next time, have your ATV taken away from you. I had a neighbor friend who had a few kids, and they had the ATVs, and the police officers had found out about, it's great because these guys have great, They really have, I would say, great intelligence. They found out about an illegal gathering someplace that was in the middle of a residential area. And so what they did was they went to areas where they knew they would find people who had ATVs who were about to join this rally. And they were able to kind of shut things down before it started by saying, hey, listen, we'll confiscate this vehicle if you're leaving to go to this rally. But if you're just going to keep it in the driveway or in the yard today, that's great. And this illegal rally that was going to happen right in the middle of a residential block didn't happen because of the intelligence they used to stop it. Moving forward, some of these cameras, we have the technology to have some of these cameras to have sensors, right? Now, we do have the shot spotter right now. It identifies gunshots. But one of the problems with the shot spotter is that now a lot of people, young guys, a lot of times I see these young guys, have modified their muffler. And it makes it sound as if gunshots are occurring in our community. So sometimes car horns are going off, alarms are going off because they're speeding down the street and their muffler is backfiring because they've modified their muffler. Now, there is a law to address this right now, but the police can't get out there fast enough. So if they get out to a neighborhood, they're coming because they think they're gunshots. That takes away our law enforcement away from another area where they could be trying to stop something from happening. So we've got to crack down on these illegal mufflers. And a way to do that is by using the technology, the audio technology that can be connected to these cameras to not only catch the people doing this, but to also catch them when the muffler is backfiring on streets so that we can track them and then find them at their homes if we have to, and then find them for modifying the muffler. But we have to be able to use technology in a different way to enforce. Now, the fines can not only deter people from doing that, but also the fines can go to the state. And the money going to the state can then help to pay for the cameras and the technology that you're putting in this program. So I think the camera enforcement will pay for itself, essentially. I also think that we need to expand the uses of speed cameras, right, across the city. How many times in the last, I don't know, year or so, have we heard about people getting killed because of speeding, whether it's coming off a highway in a service road, or whether somebody hits a child speeding around a corner or coming down a block? So we've got to increase the use of speed cameras. I know people say, oh, there's so many in our community. I've talked to people in Middle Village. I've talked to people in Maspeth. They say the same thing. They say, oh, why are there so many cameras in our community? But the truth is that automated enforcement allows police to do other things. They don't have to worry about enforcing speeding. You don't have to worry about having a cop car out there looking for speeding. You have cameras enforcing. So that means the police can do other things, right? So it's a better usage of the police force if you put more cameras out there. And again, I think the cameras are important to have because I've heard too many times over the last year where people are speeding and there's been a fatality because of speeding, whether it's a pedestrian or it's people in the car. But, you know, something that has happened, and we talk about, you know, making sure that this doesn't criminalize the people in our communities of color in particular. So I think that what we can do is, for all local and state violations, we can reduce the summons for lower income families across the board, right? Food stamp recipients. Let's make it something that is truly fair. And let's do that based on their income. You know, what we talk about in terms of addressing issues of people going to jail because they have unpaid fines. Sometimes, whether it's bail or whether it's unpaid fines and they're arrested because they have all these unpaid fines, it's simply because they can't afford to pay the fines. It's not because they don't want to. So why don't we create a program where we can address that by looking at people based on their income. And if they have a fine, let's make it affordable. Then if they decide not to pay for it, we know that they can afford it, at least we believe so based on their income, then we can deal with it differently. But right now, it's across the board, everybody's getting fined the same thing, and everybody doesn't have the same income. It's really, truly unfair, in particular to communities of color, where we have, in Southeast Queens, we have one of the highest median income indexes in the entire country. And at the same time, within South Jamaica, we have one of the lowest poverty income indexes in the entire country.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about with that, and I'm you know, once again, these ideas 2022, and just the one that really stood out to me was the sound, and bringing some enforcement around the noise that's happening. I mean, I can tell you, especially in the summertime, you know, when my child was younger, it would be at least 2 times a night that we'd have to wake up and go in there because of the noise. And you know, previously the firecrackers, thank God, it seems like, you know, we kind of got over that one.
You,
but
you and I talked about that. We had conversations with the police
yeah.
department when they came in to talk about it, right?
Oh, yeah, and the DA at the time.
And the DA, we talked
Yes,
to the DA about it too, right, Jermaine? Right.
Right. And so, but you know, we're in a time now where they are becoming more prevalent in the streets, the ATVs, the dirt bikes, and the speeding and the noise pollution. So I'm happy to hear that there are some ideas related to that on the campaign. Oh, let's look at some of the chat. There's some comments here. Just gonna go down. Deborah Fairley says the precincts also need a lot where they can tow box trucks, etc., that are parked on residential streets. I think that is, yeah, go ahead.
Let me start with that, Jermaine. Let me just start real quickly. So what we found out, unfortunately, is that, and I found this only because I had a truck that was on a residential street in South Jamaica, near Liberty Avenue. And this truck was there. I mean, I don't know, months apparently. As somebody was going back and forth, I don't know, fixing bikes, working on bikes or whatever. But really, it was there like every single day. Big truck. And it was blocking the view of what was going on behind that truck to most of the neighbors. It was like 2 doors away from a residential home. But there were all kinds of things happening behind that truck in the evening. People didn't know. People were afraid to walk by the truck because they were afraid somebody might grab them or do something. I eventually got the 103rd Precinct, working with the community relations, to work with the neighbors in the community and get the truck towed because it didn't have a license plate. But what I found out during that experience is that all of the lots now where they picked up and towed trucks and cars were full. Can you imagine? Throughout the entire city, all the lots were full. So there was a backlog, not only in the supply chain, but there was a backlog on picking up these illegal trucks or the trucks that are parked illegally because they had no place to put them. We've got to be able to get, I mean, this pandemic has taught us a lot of things. So we've got to be able to get some more land that we can use so that there will be a place to tow these trucks that are illegally parked, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, and sometimes presenting a hazard for the people in those communities that where the trucks are just sitting.
So I'd love to read the next comment. There are people with 2-family homes that have tenants when they don't pay their rents, and when they take them to court, it's very hard to get them out. Some landlords have not collected rent in 2 years. We know that the demographics in Southeast Queens is a little bit different from the rest of New York City in terms of renters to homeowners and back and forth. There is a little bit of a difference. There's a difference, and this is an issue that, you know, is there. I'm not too sure if this conversation probably should happen on the housing, you know, front on our housing conversation, but you know, you could say a few words if you'd like to on this.
Well, because we have that situation with landlords, there's an emergency rental assistance program, and we can make sure one of us will put it in the chat. But it's fully funded in the budget. But it really needs to be a part of the safety net plan that we bring to the state when we get elected, truthfully, because it is an issue for our homeowners, the smaller landlords. I mean, and those are the ones I want to help and support. The larger landlords, the ones that have these multi-dwelling units, downtown Jamaica, we've got to do something to make sure that those people do not get evicted without good cause. So we've got 2 different really dynamics. One side of, let's say, Liberty Avenue is really filled, maybe a little bit back to Linden Boulevard, is really filled with houses, private homes. And the other side, going back up to Hillside, has a lot of multi-dwelling units, apartment buildings. So I get it. we've got to do something to protect the landlords, the small mom and pop landlords, as we say, with the homes. And so we've got to expand that program. Thank goodness the moratorium is over. I mean, I saw people I saw the other day moving trucks in my building, and, I looked at the landlord and I was like, wow, we got a lot of people moving in. And one of the neighbors said, you should ask the super. And I talked to the super, and the super said, no, that's a lot of people moving out. There were a lot of people during this period of time that took advantage of the pandemic and didn't pay rent in 2 years, leading some people to have foreclosure signs on their building, because as a landlord, how can you afford to keep the property and keep paying for someone who's living inside your home for 2 years? So we've got to do more to protect those homeowners, those landlords.
Okay. Jumping in, next subject, quality of life subject, transportation. So let's discuss a little bit of the fact that we have limited transportation options here in Southeast Queens. It's at this point, it's the common phrase, we are in a transit desert. Here, it's a reality that we have to live with, forcing many people to have to drive, forcing many people to have to pay very high, expensive forms to get to work each day and home. Now that we're leaving that remote setting, we're not going to be Zooming to work, many of us anymore. We have to physically show up. Tell us a little bit about what your plans are to help alleviate this burden around us being in a transit desert, about us not having that many options with relation to transportation.
I've talked to a lot of the representatives from the Transport Workers Union. I've talked to some of the quality of life, or spoken about some of the quality of life issues, talking to some of the good government groups across the city. And I think that what Senator Leroy Comrie did and Councilmember Danique Miller did was really important. Creating the Atlantic ticket was really a fantastic thing to do. That connects Southeast Queens to downtown Brooklyn. And then you can jump on the train from there and get right to Penn Station. But what we need to do is expand that. We need to expand it to Penn Station. Expand the Atlantic ticket from Southeast Queens to Penn Station. That'll help to get people from our community, Long Island Railroad, straight to Penn Station in a much quicker way, right? No transfers. What we have in our community is a transportation desert. And so how many people are taking sometimes not just one, but 2 buses just to get to the subway? So you take 2 buses and a subway, right? That's unacceptable. That's why organizations, I should say unions like TWU, and of course, New York City Department of Transportation are looking at other options. I understand that some people are concerned about bus lanes, and they feel that, hey, bus lanes take up a lot of space, and sometimes the streets are too small to have 2 lanes, let alone now you have a bus lane, or you have a bike lane, now you have 1 lane. Here's my thinking, and I've knocked on 7,000 doors. You're right, there are some streets that are too small, so we've got to expand, we've got to widen those streets, right? Where we can. But I also have seen more bikes, more scooters, more motorbikes, more skateboards than I ever thought I would see. There are so many people that are now using other modes of transportation other than cars. And I was really surprised. And at some point I said, you know what? With all of these accidents that are happening with people on bikes, people on these motorized bikes now, people on scooters, and people on skateboards even, or motorized electric skateboards, we've got to do something about that. So maybe you're right, we've got to widen the streets, but we've got to widen the streets that are too narrow so that we can create more bike lanes. Sometimes you have a bike lane that goes for 2 or 3 blocks. It's like a bike lane to nowhere. Again, when that happens, what is a person who is biking, or what is a person who has a skateboard or a motorbike or a moped or a scooter? What do? There's not much they can do at that point. They now have to drive in the street with cars and put themselves at risk. Biking is a very healthy option, but I see other people using other modes of transportation more than ever. So I think we've got to mandate bus lane enforcement cameras and traffic light signal prioritization so that we can make the buses more efficient. So if we have traffic signal prioritization, then what will happen is buses will then be able to go in a much more expeditious manner along the routes of America Boulevard, Sutphin Boulevard, and Rockaway Boulevard. On those commercial strips, with traffic signal prioritization, it will allow the traffic lights to then stop cars and allow buses to go through. So buses will be on a much faster pace. The route will be much more efficient. People will get from point A to point B in a much more efficient manner. In particular, those who have to take the bus to work or the bus to the train to go to work. Your commute was so much easier and so much quicker. And the traffic enforcement cameras, oh, you're right. I see, Ms. Fairley, I see the comment. You're right. We've got to also do a good job with making sure that people who are on the bikes and scooters, that they are, of course, obeying the traffic laws themselves. So that's a more complicated, nuanced issue, but we understand that right now there's not a lot of enforcement. In fact, there are not rules on the book that actually prohibit people from bikes from stopping at stop signs. They do it because of safety and should do it, but there's nothing on the books, no law that says that they have to stop or that they can't go right through. You're supposed to give pedestrians and others the right of way if you're an automobile driver. We've got to do something to make sure that they know that now they have to observe the rules of the road also, because there are more of them on the road now than ever. So we've got to address that. And sometimes you address that with legislation.
Yeah, those are, it's just this common theme that we're seeing right now, with our transportation options, what that leads to other people kind of making their way. You are right, with relation to different options that I'm starting to see as well, of people trying to get around. And I don't blame them, living where we live and what we're seeing and not the many options as, other places in New York City, it's understandable. And we have to adjust and think 2022 and beyond about solutions and how to address it. So I think it's very important to have leadership in Albany doing that, from this district. So after such a conversation where we got your opinion on a lot of things, I appreciate everyone that had stuff that they put in the chat, but I want to leave space now for the people that do have questions for you to feel free to open your mics or write in your questions, and we can address them. Will we be opening the mics? Yeah? Yes. Right. So yeah, please feel free to open your mics and ask questions. You can raise your hands if that works for you as well, so we can have some order here, but I'm sure there are some questions. I want to leave space for anyone that wants to voice those questions.
So let me just address, I see that not a question, but a comment from Ms. Moody. And so she talks about the need to reroute buses in other neighborhoods. Well, the city is now undergoing a very, very comprehensive discussion with residents. Ms. Moody, if you send us an email to andrewsforprogress.com, we can probably tell you when the next meeting will be, or we may be able to pull it up before you leave. But get in on that discussion, because people are talking about the transportation routes and the importance of efficient travel and transportation in our communities, especially in Southeast Queens. We have a transportation desert. That means we don't have viable transportation options here. You almost have to have a car to get around, right? From one place to another, unless you're going to take 2 buses to one place. So get in on those discussions, because the Department of Transportation is having those discussions with communities throughout, thank you, Amir, with communities all across Queens to talk about, in particular, Southeast Queens. So if you have something to say in terms of that, about rerouting the buses or about a bus stop and you're taking transportation and you're on this call and you're saying, hey, I heard that they were gonna, instead of the bus stopping every 2 or 3 blocks now, it's gonna be 6 blocks. And I can't do that. I can't walk 6 blocks. My knees are not great. So I'm not gonna walk 6 blocks to the next bus stop when there's a bus stop right down the block from me. Get in on these discussions. We put some stuff in the chat, right? So you can take a look at the dates and times for the next meetings. submit testimony, come in and testify. Talk about what your concerns are, because they're listening to people all across the borough, but in particularly now in Southeast Queens, because of the fact that we have a transportation desert.
Great, and Amir just put those links in the chat. I've been spending a lot of time with the redesign. I haven't taken a bus in, I'd say, 20 years, but that just knowing that how critical that is for our community. So I encourage everyone to take a look at it. I think this is their 5th draft of it, but it's taken in feedback from the community, which is going to be very important for how we start to address our desert, along with some of the good ideas Dr. Andrews has here that will be fighting for us in Albany. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of change coming our way in a good way. Amir has let us know. So now you can unmute yourselves and turn on your cameras. You could do it simultaneously. We can walk and chew at the same time. But I want to leave space for those that have questions. Please feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask. I want to leave a little bit of time for that, just in case someone's having a hard time unplugging, and then we can go on. Okay. Awesome. I think this is a sign that we're kind of hitting the different subjects and speaking about the things that we need to. I see Brother Mitchell has taken off his, put on his camera.
Give acknowledgement to the president of our Democratic Club, Billy Mitchell.
Yes, for sure.
Fred Wilson Democratic Club, JSS, Executive Director, Billy Mitchell, President.
Good evening, Mr. Mitchell. Do you have something you want to contribute?
I think you've covered all those issues that I might have. However, you mentioned the seniors. I really would like to see additional housing in South Jamaica.
I'm sorry, Billy. Yeah, we addressed that earlier. We were talking about the need for affordable senior housing in particular.
Exactly.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, again, as I said earlier in this conversation, we are aware now that there are more homeless seniors in this community than we ever thought possible. This used to be, and we have right here in Rochdale Village, a naturally occurring retirement community. This is basically a community of retirees. Oh, and so you're right, we got to address that. I see Charles Jenkins jumped in, bus flow, including limited stops and local stops. Charles is the chair of the Coalition of Black Trade Unions and also a leader in the Transport Workers Union. Charles, you may want to jump in and say something since the issue has come up. And I know you guys have in particular been concerned about this issue and about where people fall on this issue, especially those like myself who are trying to get elected to public office.
Yeah, thank you so much for having a forum. And as a resident of Southeast Queens, also as a member of the Transport Workers Union that understands transportation, what we have a limited of is more bus flow. If we had, we talk about Queens being a bus desert, so more bus flow, meaning more vehicles on the routes, independent routes. We are waiting in some cases 20 minutes. We folks have seen it, right? More bus flow. Here's how we do it. We put more equipment on the routes. That gives shorter wait times. And then we do two things, right? We have, for those that, are not in the rush to get to work, maybe you're going to, your local appointment and things like that, right? So there is an express limited stops, and then there's that local stop. We got to do things differently that make more sense, and we need more equipment out there. We have to advocate for that. It has to happen in Queens because of the need to get from our communities to a transportation, either the subway or the Long Island Railroad. And I think you said something, Dr. Andrew, with respect to expanding the city ticket into Penn Station. Let's bring more options, because the reality is we can continue to talk about Queens being a desert, it won't change. So we have to deal with what we have. right? We live in the suburbs, quote unquote. Let's put more equipment to get us to, the subway lines or the MTA railroad. And I'm going to be out there advocating for that every step of the way with the community.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Andrews.
I think Charles, he succinctly put it. I mean, more equipment on the roads, get more buses out there so we can address this issue. And, as he said, get some more express buses out there. Every bus doesn't have to be local, so that people can, who are going back just to the train station, get on a bus, limited stops, get there much quicker. And those who are going more locally can just jump on that local bus. But of course, limiting the time that buses are coming also is going to reduce the time. So you put more equipment out there, and now instead of waiting 20 minutes for a bus to get you someplace, you can wait 5 minutes maybe. So I agree with Charles in that regard. I saw a question, and go ahead, JSS.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of everything with relation to the bus, the redesign, what we're living in a desert, and there's some great points there, and it's encouraging that there are ideas that we have, and I appreciate what Mr. Jenkins said, around us acknowledging that where we are and what we're going to do about it. So I want to thank him for that. There are some points in the chat, but I'd also like to just continue to leave the floor open for just maybe another minute or another question or so around this conversation that we just had. If there are points that people want to pull out, things that they want to acknowledge, questions that they want to ask Dr. Andrews, I know this would be the time to do it. Thank you all for joining us. And then Ms. Pringle says, why are there so many trains going to Penn Station versus Atlantic? Just to surmise, so many trains going to Penn Station, not enough trains going to Atlantic, especially during the pandemic. And, realizing that this is a bit of an antidote essentially of what it is the larger issue within our community. But I wanted to give you space to respond to that, Dr. Andrews.
That's a good question. I'm hoping Charles can help me respond to that.
I certainly can. And it's really simple. And we really have to be able to understand this here issue. So Penn Station, get this, Penn Station has 20 tracks that will allow more trains in, where there's only 6 tracks at Atlantic Terminal. So Atlantic Terminal cannot hold the volume of equipment at Atlantic Terminal, where Penn Station is a major transportation hub. More trains can come in. Therefore, more traffic goes into Penn Station.
And then I think it gives the opportunity for Dr. Andrews' idea of expanding the ticket to those that are going to Penn Station to be available as well. And that should be a priority, just because there are 20 tracks, so I appreciate you sharing that bit of information and making a aha moment.
For me too, Jermaine. For me too.
Yeah, I was like, duh. Why didn't I think of that?
Well, the great thing is you can't think of everything, right? You're an elected official and you're aspiring for public office like I am, like we are. I believe that this community is aspiring to put someone else, or thinking about someone else who's aspiring to be in public office and hopefully assisting me with getting there. So that we've got to think about things differently. But in thinking about things differently, we're not going to have all the answers, right, Jermaine? Right, it's not myself, you, Billy, Amir, we're not going to have all the answers. But the great thing is that I have good friends, longtime friends over 2 decades, like Charles Jenkins, who was a leader with TWU, Transport Workers Union, and also the chairperson of the Coalition of Black Trade Unions. So he connects with all the leaders of all the Black trade unions. These issues come up. They discuss these things in meetings all the time. So you have to utilize the resources you have. And some of those resources are people resources. I'm really proud to have Charles' support and his endorsement. And I'm proud to have him as a part of the team and a longtime friend for over close to 3 decades, in fact, because he's able to help me to think these things through so that we can make some informed policy decisions, not in a vacuum, but with the expertise of people at the table who are going through it right now and are leaders in these areas.
Indeed. I can't think of a better way actually to start, to lead into, us just talking about what other kind of conversations that we're going to have, and the people in the room that are also going to be lending their wisdom, as well as, you know, it has been a part of informing your policies and plans and ideas for the change that you want to bring to the community. And so we have a list of other community conversations, other conversations with Dr. Andrews that we have coming up. And I want to just share this with everyone. So today obviously was our quality of life conversation. Our next one is going to be housing and seniors. And I know there are a lot of advocates on this line, including Billy, Mr. Mitchell, President Mitchell, you know, just speaking about the fact that, you know, our housing and our seniors and the mix of those two has to be discussed, has to be talked about with Dr. Andrews, and hearing what your plans are, exhaustive plans. And you know, we got into the weeds a little bit today, and I would love to do the same thing again for that conversation as well. After that, we're going to go to youth and education, just speaking about, you know, our young people and how we're better developing them to be productive adults, and also the education supports that we need in our communities to be able to effectively impact our young people. So that happens on Saturday, May 21st at 6 p.m. And then the last one, you know, may not be the last one, but it's the last one that we have scheduled, because, you know, these are hot commodities. If you ask me, these type of conversations need to happen. But jobs and public safety, and that happens on Friday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. Jobs and public safety. I don't think I need to give a long spiel about that. We know what that means. That's a conversation that we need to have. And I'm very confident that, you know, Dr. Andrews and the team has really thought about it, seen and figured out some ideas that can bring us, well, like once again to 2022, because some of the plans and some of the leadership that we've had in our community is not up to date as it should be. And that's just my opinion. And so these are the different dates that we have. We have May 17th, May 21st, and June 3rd. Please, 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 please share with someone in the community. Have them come out. Send them the link while we're doing the conversation, while we're having the conversation. Share it to them in advance so that they can join into and hear some of the plans that that Dr. Andrews has for our community. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these conversations haven't happened in some time in our communities. And this is an opportunity for us to do that and to really hear from everyone. I appreciate everyone that spent some time with us in the chat and given their feedback. Feedback is, you know, one of the most vital, important things for anybody's campaign, is understanding what people are saying. And simultaneously, I have to say that, you know, while you're inviting people out to come out to these town halls, please don't forget, we're going to be posting this very video on Facebook. Hello, everyone watching from Facebook. We're going to be posting on Facebook. Share it with a friend. At them, you know, Jermaine Sean Smith, and at the people that we know that are in our communities, so that they can see this conversation and join in for the next one. Meet the Candidate Night is already on both platforms. So please do that. Make sure you share the good word, that these conversations are happening, that these ideas are being put forth, that Dr. Andrews has a vision for our district. I will get off my soapbox now, because the man with the ideas, the man with the vision for the community, I'd love to give you an opportunity to give some closing remarks, and I'll take it from there. Muted. You are muted.
Here I go. Sorry. Thank you. Here I go. So first of all, thank you very much, Jermaine. Great job with these town halls. You may want to mention your podcast that's coming up soon too, because in the podcast that you've done with me, where people get a lot more insight and I get a lot more personal with you, because in that conversation of the podcast that you have, we really, really, really got into the weeds about my personal life and all things about me and how I came through the system. A lot of things we talked about. But I want to thank everybody else who came out tonight. This is important. We're going to continue to have these discussions. This doesn't stop with election. We believe that once elected, we're going to continue to have these discussions in person and virtually. We're going to have committee meetings in the community. We're going to have area meetings where we go to different parts of the district and have these discussions. We're going to bring city and state officials out, and we're going to ask them to respond to some of these questions. This is the beginning of something that we have never had in this district before, but we're going to do some things differently because the people in this district deserve to have representation, which is not only responsible, but visible representation. They need to be able to see their elected officials at town halls, not just one a year. We can do these things virtually now. There's a new way of doing things. We can get people together, 25, 30 at a time, 50, 70, 6, 10 people at a time. I don't care how many people we have. I just want to be engaged with constituents in discussions about how we can improve this community, not by myself, but together. So I'm thankful for those who attended tonight, and hopefully you'll come out and spread the word to come to some other virtual conversations. Remember, don't forget, if you're interested in voting, you need to remember that we also have early voting, not just on election day. So don't forget to vote Dr. Anthony Andrews, June 28th. If you don't remember anything else from this conversation, I want you to remember to vote for Dr. Andrews, June 28th, because that's the way we start changing things in this community, by changing leadership, because it truly is time for a change. And of course, early voting starts January, June 18th through Sunday, June 26th. So don't forget, you have election day on the 28th, but early voting starts June 18th. We are really, really closing in on the date for early voting, almost a month away. So spread the word. This is a critical election. The lines have been redrawn, and we want to make sure that we bring people in who have not been engaged in these discussions before in a different way than we've ever done in this community.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. You know, it's 42 days till the polls open for early voting. 42 days, Jackie Robinson, 42 days. That's what we got until it's the polls are open for early voting. That's like next week, the way time moves. But in the chat, you know, there is the link to the podcast. That was from season 1. So this was some time ago. And if you see the title of the conversation, the hardest working man in Southeast Queens, probably the city, possibly the state. That's the name of the title of the sequence, the podcast interview that was done with Dr. Andrews. Yes, everything that he said is true. You can listen and you can hear more details. We dive into a lot of subjects with more context and more color, more than the time that we had provided tonight. So feel free to listen in there. Feel free to share it with someone else. And once again, 42 days till polls open. I would like to thank everyone for joining us on this rainy Saturday evening. I would like to also say happy Mother's Day in advance to all the mothers that are on the call, to all those that step in the gap for people as mothers, and for all those that will be mothers one day. Thank you so much for all that you do. You really make everyone's life a reality, makes everyone's life easier because of, the sacrifices that mothers make on a consistent basis. So I'd like to say happy Mother's Day. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Thank you all for all the work that you're doing and for sitting in on and listening to the conversation that we've had here with Dr. Andrews. And with that, I'd love to give it to you, Dr. Andrews, to just close us out, and we'll be on our way.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad. I'm really happy. Deborah, thank you so much. Happy Nurses Week to everybody. Every year at Queens Hospital, we would do a number of different things for Nurses Week. We'd have events. We'd have food in the evening for the nurses that are on night shift. Our nurses are unsung heroes, first responders. We had a lot of staff out during the pandemic, but our nurses were there. And some of them were working double and triple shifts without break, sometimes without a coffee break, sometimes without bathroom breaks. Sometimes the ratio was not just 4-to-1, which is ideal, but the ratio was 10-to-1. Our nurses do such an incredible job, especially in this community, Jamaica Hospital, Queens Hospital. So I want to say happy Nurses Week to everybody. And of course, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm just really, really hopeful that people will spread the word, talk about the engagement that we plan on bringing to this community, and get other people involved. We need to have these discussions. The discussions can't just be me talking about what I want to do. I want to hear from the residents of our community about what they'd like to see done and the changes they'd like to see made to improve the quality of life for everyone. And thank you, Jermaine and the team, for this great event. Really appreciate you. Happy Mother's Day, everybody, and God bless.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.